Welcome to the Hey Docs podcast with your host, Jill Allen. Today, I am joined by Nick Cepparulo from CFS Dental Division, and in this episode, we are covering all things insurance. From what you need to protect your practice when you are getting started to common pitfalls practices face when coverage is lacking. There's a lot to discuss, so let's get into it. We all know running and growing an orthodontic practice isn't easy. And technology is supposed to help you, but oftentimes your practice management software doesn't. Some of them are even clunky and need lots of third-party add-ons. That's why I recommend Greyfinch to my startup and existing clients, because Greyfinch is different. Greyfinch is an all-in-one web-based platform that saves you time and boosts your client base, productivity, and bottom line, with no downloads or third-party software needed. It even has tools you can't find anywhere else, like televisits, two-way email and text messaging, a patient self-service hub, and much more. Want to see how it can grow your practice? Visit greyfinch.com/Jill Allen and see why countless leading practices have made the switch. Are you feeling the squeeze from declining starts and cash flow as costs continue to rise? Building on their industry-leading patient acquisition, insurance management, and collections solution, OrthoFi is delivering groundbreaking innovations to keep your practice thriving. OrthoFi's latest feature, iMax, allows you to maximize every insurance claim submission, adding tens of thousands of dollars to your annual production. Plus, with the game-changing combo of FPT10 and third-party financing, OrthoFi is making it even easier for patients to say yes to treatment while ensuring steady cash flow for your practice. OrthoFi's commitment to your success in today's evolving orthodontic landscape is why I recommend them to my clients, and right now is the best time to get started. Visit startmoresmiles.com and use promo code HeyDocs to get 50% off your implementation. Nick, I am so excited to have you on Hey Docs. Thanks for being here.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Yes. So one of the ways I like to start off Hey Docs is to always have my guests tell a little bit about themselves and about their company. So would you mind just starting us off that way?
Of course. So my name's Nick. I am the Vice President for CFS Dental Division. We're a dental-specific financial planning and insurance group. We help dentists with everything they need, from personal insurances like disability insurance, life insurance, malpractice insurance, to business insurances. So I know you and I have worked together on a lot of mutual clients, but when clients are doing startups or acquisitions, we like to help with any of the business insurances they need, starting with, if it's a startup and they're doing construction, general liability, builder's risk policies. If they're doing an acquisition or when they're transitioning to opening, we set up the business owner policies, workers' compensation, cyber liability, employment practices liability coverage, all that kind of good stuff. Outside of insurance, we help dentists from dental school and residency throughout their career with student loan repayment. We help map out their loans, the best repayment program for them based on their specific situations, given things like marital status, dependents, basically life plans, if they plan to go into practice ownership, things like that, all affect how your student loans do get repaid. We also help with full service financial planning. So we do everything from like retirement investing, normal investing. We help set up LLCs, pretty much anything financial that dentists will ever need, from the beginning steps, like from dental school all the way through if they choose a residency, obviously if they go ortho specific, or any residency, and all the way to retirement.
Yeah, that's great. You guys have been a great resource to myself and my clients, is knowing that you cover the gamut, and depending upon what they need, you're there to step in and help them. When I talk with my docs, if you're one of my clients, you've heard me say, this is the unsexy side of being a business owner. Nobody gets into business and says, wow, I can't wait to get all these insurance policies. I can't wait for my general liability policy. That's going to be awesome. But it's all the things that we definitely need in place. And especially if we're doing a startup or an acquisition, we need it for any different part within our life cycle of being a doctor. Today, I'd like to talk just a little bit about, because a big part of my listenership is younger doctors who are just getting started doing startups and whatnot. And I'm wondering if you can, you alluded to it in the beginning, but really just talk about those key policies. When I'm working with docs, I have this kind of startup step-by-step guide of everything that we need to do to get ready to open up a practice, or if we're doing an acquisition, everything we need to do to get ready for that. And I'm wondering if you wouldn't mind just diving into what are those key policies and what should team members be looking for in deciding, because I do have a lot of clients that'll go shop different policies, and each company may put together different things into a policy, which could affect cost, which could affect coverage. So I'm wondering if we can lean on your expertise to walk us through key policies and what they mean and what they should be looking for. I know that's a lot to ask you to do, but I know I've got people that are like, yes, bring it. What do I need to know?
I want to hear about the insurance. From a business standpoint, if people want to do a startup, I want to do an acquisition, I want to get into that practice ownership, but I don't know the insurance side. If you're doing from the beginning with a startup, you're going to have a construction period. Usually, I think 99% of any startup clients we talk to are going to do a full build out. During the period of time that you're doing your build out, you're going to need two policies on the business side. You're going to need general liability. You're also going to need a builder's risk policy. General liability is going to cover like any type of bodily injury that could happen on your or in your space or on your property, like slip and fall on the sidewalk outside or enter your space when they're obviously not supposed to. Something happens that basically protects anything that could happen on that side. And then builder's risk is obviously going to cover like the construction project itself. Both policies are only needed during the time of construction. I always mention when we do like my initial call with a startup client, hey, we're going to gather a bunch of information on not only yourself and the bank information that whoever you're working for your lending, but also on the physical space. These policies are only in place during construction. They get quoted annually. We always like to remind everyone, you're not going to pay that full price. You're only going to pay probably about half, as most build outs are 5 to 6 months, barring issues. And then from even with a startup, but more so on like the acquisition side, the things that you're going to need from the beginning are going to be what's called your business owner policy, and workers' compensation is mandated for all businesses, but that protects employees if they get hurt while working. So instead of coming after my boss, I tripped and fell over a chair, that comes out of workers' compensation. Your business owner policy is something that's I would say the biggest policy that you're ever going to get when you own a business. That's something put in place after construction ends on your startup and when you're ready to, open as a dental practice, or when equipment starts getting delivered. With an acquisition, you buy your business and you're like, okay, I'm ready to open. I need insurance. Your business owner policy is going to contain all of the little insurance policies that you will need as a practice. Things that are going to come in that business owner policy are going to be things like general liability, employment practices liability insurance, which is going to cover any type of like wrongful termination suits. If someone says they fired me for sexual harassment or whatever, if there was like sexual harassment claims, any type of like racism, like things that they could come after you for, that employment practices liability coverage covers. You're going to have cyber liability and data breach coverage, which is important. I was reading earlier this morning about cyber liability claims rising 80% over the last year because of the amount of technology people are using and putting all their stuff on computers. For a hacker, it's like a dream. They go in, they see patients' names, they get addresses, social security numbers, credit card information, things like that. And those are coverages that your business owner policy is going to come with, but we always recommend to, as people are progressing into their ownership. So like your first couple of years, you can keep the coverage that comes with the policy. As your system builds with more patients, more information, we always look to increase that coverage just to make sure that if, God forbid, your system gets hacked, you have more than the standard $50,000 worth of coverage. It's also going to cover business personal property. That's going to cover equipment, furniture, chairs, computers, anything within your space. Those are policies always recommended, or I would not even recommend it, but I would say that are needed by the bank. So when you get like a loan for your practice, they're always going to want to see that type of protections in place.
Yeah. I'm going to ask about the startups because I want my listeners to hear this. When going back to builder's risk, we'll see a contractor carrying builder's risk. And I'm wondering if you can just talk to why a doctor would have their own policy, or when one policy supersedes another, because this can be a little confusing. I've got a couple other questions about a couple other policies because I'm talking to the expert, so I might as well get expert answers. Can you answer that one first?
With the builder's risk, I was talking to somebody yesterday. We set up a builder's risk policy for someone and they're like, my contractor has it. It's better to have your own too. Contractors have to have builder's risk to work and do construction. A lot of times your builder can add you as an additional insured on their policy. We recommend having your own. Builder's risk is super cheap. Typical, I would say average builder's risk policies on an annual basis are like, depending on obviously where the area scope of the project, it's very dependent on like the amount of money that your project's going to cost, the physical location of your project, all that kind of good stuff. But typical policy is going to cost maybe between 800 to 1,000 a year. And that's like on the higher end. I've seen them as low as like 400. And again, you're only going to pay probably around half of that. For $500, you're better off getting your own. Reason being is if, God forbid, the contractor got sued for something that happened that obviously the policy would cover, and you're named as an additional insured on their policy and you don't have your own, if the contractor says this is your fault, or actually this liability is on you, they can turn around and be like, I'm not covering this. And then at that point, if you don't have your own policy and they're basically taking you off of their additional insured part of their policy, then you're just like, I got to pay this out. So, then it could basically just open you up to the liability that the policy's there to protect. The same thing actually goes with general liability too. There's ways contractors can cover you with their general liability policies. That's always like never recommended, because the scope of the suit protected by general liability is going to be something that the contractor's probably not going to want to cover. So like I had a client yesterday who we set up her general liability, we set up builder's risk for her. She just had found out the bank actually went and told her, I'm not going to mention who it was, but they went and told her, oh, you don't need to get it then if the contractor has it. And this is before she even asked the contractor if she could get it listed on their policy. So she reaches out to me and she's like, why did you recommend me get these policies? And I don't want them anymore. Cancel them today. And I'm like, hold on.
Oh, let's load it.
The reason we recommended you getting these is because of those exact reasons. If you wish to cancel these and you don't want the protection, that is fine. But you need to talk to your landlord and make sure they're okay with you being listed on somebody else's policy, because the landlord always requests general liability and builder's risk. Bank's always going to require the same two things. You need to first find out if the bank's okay with it, if the landlord's okay with it, then find out if the contractor's okay with it. If all three say yes, send me correspondence canceling this is in your best interest, and we can cancel it. But we've seen over the years where a lawsuit occurred, the contractor said, we're not covering this. This was not our fault. This is within your liability of being the tenant of the space. Yeah. It's been a nightmare. And then they come back to us like, you didn't explain it. And it's, we did. You just didn't want to spend $500 for extra protection. I get it. Every dollar counts, especially when you're doing a startup. Saving every dollar that you possibly can is important. But ample protection should be in place. If I'm doing a project of this caliber, spending $700,000 to $1 million, I want to make sure that if something happens, I'm not dishing out another couple hundred grand. In today's day and age, people see a way to get compensation for something they don't deserve and come after it.
So my next question, that was a great answer. Thank you for breaking that down. My next question is, and I get this a lot, but I'm going to let the true answer come out. A lot of times we'll see on these policies, especially general liability, the bank will ask to be part of the policy. I've seen landlords asking to be part of your policy. Can you talk about that and quell some concerns about how that's not abnormal as we may think it is, and also what you should be watching out for in that regard?
All of major banks, Bank of America, US Bank, TD Bank, Huntington, like all the banks that do dental specific lending programs always want to be an additional insured on your policy. They're exposing themselves to the loan. So they're giving you, let's say it's a $700,000 loan and they're like, hey, here's 700 grand, have fun. You know what I mean? They want to make sure that if anything happens, it's not going to affect their loan itself or the means that you have to pay it back. If you got into a lawsuit, the bank wasn't on that policy, and you have to take on this lawsuit, you can't go to the bank and say, repayment starts tomorrow, but I got sued, I have to pay out this much money, or I'm going to be in court, I'm not paying this loan back. They want their loan payments coming in. Mm-hmm. Same with landlords. If something happens on the property, they can't get sued. You're taking the risk as the tenant. And that's why the policy is going to name the landlord, because the landlord wants to make sure, hey, if someone, let's say someone slips and falls in this space, and they come after me as the owner of the space, not the tenant, they want to make sure that there's protection for them as well, where they can say, hey, we're on this policy. This is the policy that's going to cover this exact situation.
Yeah.
And that's why a landlord would want to be on it, just to make sure that they're covering their butts as well as the banks covering theirs. It's just, there's a lot of, it really comes down to a financial standpoint where everyone wants to make sure that they're still getting their rent payments, their bank loan payments, and then they're not opening themselves up to liability.
Thanks for explaining that. These questions come up a lot with clients, and it's good to hear more about why. The whys are important. Is there a point where somebody would take off their bank or landlord, or are they usually staying on it through the end of the loan or lease?
The landlord's going to be on that policy for the life of your business, if until you close all your business or just cancel and say, I'm done, like I'm moving to a different space. As long as you're in that landlord space, you're always going to have them named. From a bank standpoint, you can take them off the policy once the loan's repaid. So the bank's only really going to need to have that protection in place during the amount of time that your loan's in repayment with them. So typically it's like a 10-year term. And that goes we haven't gotten into this yet, but a lot of times banks require things like life insurance, disability insurance, either on a personal or business front. And those are the same with, let's say the bank saying you need a life insurance policy collaterally assigned. That policy needs to be collaterally assigned to the bank for the time you're repaying your loan. If it's a 10-year loan, we look at a 10-year term policy. We always tell people, listen, if life insurance for those loans is $20 a month, it's super cheap, but some people don't want the extra protection. So we tell them you need this for the full 10 years that you're paying your bank back. If you end up refinancing this loan and extending it, you need to extend the life insurance. Or if you end up paying your loan back quicker. So some people are like, yeah, I don't plan on paying this back over 10 years. I might have it paid off in 5. We say after the 5 years, you can either keep it as a fully personal policy, or you can just get rid of the policy all in all. We always recommend business owners having life insurance in general, just because if God forbid something happens, they're not knocking on your family's door like, hey, this loan's still in repayment and the life insurance expired. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Such a horrible circumstance, but it happens. That's why we've got policies like this. What are those top policies for a doc on a personal side to keep them safe? I'm not sure which side this falls in, but embezzlement, if you can talk about personally and any type of policy or umbrella doctors need to know about in case of embezzlement.
Yeah. Personal policies, the biggest one, is the most popular because everybody has to have it to practice, but malpractice insurance or professional liability, that's going to cover doctors for any lawsuit brought against them for work they've performed. You need practice. If you don't have malpractice coverage, you're probably not getting hired. Loans are for startups and acquisitions as well. Obviously, they already have that. That isn't something that's, we need to set this up because you're already going to have that coverage. But with malpractice coverage, there's tons of different companies. CFS, we're not the one company insurance carrier. We work with top malpractice carriers. Same with disability, life, even the business policies take more of a brokerage approach. We work with, like, for disability, the top 5 carriers. For life insurance, we only touch like the top 3 or 4 carriers. If they don't have a great reputation with claims payouts or financial stability as a whole, we're not going to endorse those companies. More going back to the personal insurances, something else that's huge is disability insurance. Disability isn't something that's mandated to have. It's extremely recommended. 99, I'd say, % of doctors carry disability insurance because obviously that's going to cover you for if, God forbid, you got injured with any type of injury. It doesn't, a lot of people think that disability is only going to cover workplace injuries. That's workers' comp. Disability insurance is going to cover doctors for any type of injury. Let's say you're out riding your bike and fall, or get hit by a car, or hiking and break your leg, or carpal tunnel. Even mental injuries, like a lot of people have anxiety, depression, and things like that. Disability insurance is what covers you if you have to take a year off of work because you're injured and need to recuperate, or you have that anxiety issue, you just can't work, like things like that. Disability insurance is extremely important. That's something that we always recommend looking into earlier on in your career, like while you're in dental school, while you're in residency, because you're going to get discounts appropriate to where you are. If you're in dental school, you're going to get dental student rates. If you're in residency, you're going to get even better rates because furthering your training. Once you get out, you have 90 days to lock in those discounts. But it's always something super important. And we do a lot of like lunch and learns with students. We do a lot of dinner presentations. We do webinars, visit schools. We try to give as much knowledge on these policies as possible to set people up for the future. Other personal insurances, life insurance, a big one. That's something that we always recommend, especially when you're a high earning doctor. You might have a family at home. You might have a spouse that doesn't work based on living off your income. It's always something to have with when you have a mortgage. I don't have a doctor's income, but I have a mortgage, car payments, a wife, a child, another on the way. Life insurance is important because if something happened to me, I don't want my wife to have to be like, oh my God, how am I going to pay the mortgage, the cars, deal with kids, putting them in school. It goes beyond doctors, that life insurance is something everybody should have unless you have a ton of money, even a small policy, just to make sure that even if it's just going to cover like funeral costs, burial costs, the next year after, God forbid, passing away, there's always protection. It's super affordable. Life insurance, if you got like a term policy, you could get a 30-year-old doctor could get $1 million 20-year term life insurance policy for 15 to 20 bucks a month. For that price, it's a no-brainer.
Unfortunately, with insurance, we may never use the policy. Thank God if we never have to. I had a doc once playing softball, just a good game of softball. And unfortunately, just a rogue warm-up throw from somebody else ended up hitting him in the face. He was out for months, major trauma, face injury, brain injury. Luckily, he survived. If he had not had a disability policy, it helped cover the docs that were covering his patients. We're watching every penny, but you're playing roulette if we don't have the right policies in place.
Yeah. On a disability front, car accidents. I've had a client rear-ended and out of work for 3 years. She's had 3 or 4 shoulder surgeries. It's something that you never look at. You never think, oh, this could happen to me. But it's very common. I've had clients bit by dogs and couldn't work for 6 months because they were in the hospital. Things that you think could never happen to you are more common than you think. Cancer diagnosis, you never plan for that. But today's day and age, everybody knows somebody that has cancer. Those are things that you don't look for. But if it happened, what would you do? If you're a doctor making $500,000 a year, your spouse doesn't work, you have 2 kids in school, what would you do?
Hey docs, on this podcast, I talk about a lot of different ways you can set your practice apart. But here's one that might surprise you. Maybe you haven't thought about it before, but the equipment you use can make a big difference, not just for the patient experience, but for you and your team too. That's why I want to let you know about a new line of orthodontic equipment from ADEC. I visited their headquarters in Oregon earlier this year to take a sneak peek for myself, and I have to say, I was impressed. ADEC has manufactured award-winning dental equipment for 60 plus years, and they're bringing that same level of excellence to ortho. From comfortable, compact patient chairs to a versatile workstation and delivery to ergonomic dental stools, ADEC orthodontic equipment is designed for a smooth and easy workflow. Day after day, patient after patient, see the difference it can make for your practice. Click the link in our show notes to learn more about ADEC Orthodontic Solutions. Hey docs, let's talk about Smile Suite, because it's not just another scheduling system. It's a game changer in the world of new patient management. And as a proud Smile Suite partner, I've witnessed the incredible impact it has on practices of all sizes. Smile Suite means your new patient calls and web leads are expertly handled 7 days a week, even during nights and weekends. And they offer top-notch customizable presentation software and seamless post-consultation follow-up. It's like having a secret weapon for your practice's success. Curious? Dive into the revolution at GetSmileSuite.com. And don't forget to mention Hey Docs to unlock some extra goodies. Elevate your practice with Smile Suite, because every smile deserves a suite of excellence.
If you can't work and there's no other income,
especially if you're having to make big decisions like, do I sell a practice? There's a lot of interim, maybe in the long run you'll get out of it, but what do you do in that middle phase? I get asked about this a lot and have worked with doctors who've been in this circumstance where they have had some fraud happen within their practice and embezzlement or whatnot. Can you talk about which policy that falls under, and should doctors be thinking about having some type of a rider that in the event that they were to encounter where they're like, my gosh, I just realized somebody's embezzled a couple $100,000 from me. Can you talk about that? I know it's confusing. I'm not going to talk about the legal component, just from an insurance standpoint.
Were you speaking? I have a question before I answer. Yeah. Are you speaking more on if someone were to like hack your system and get money out of like your bank account or something like that? Or are you talking like an employee stealing?
I think the more common one is the employee. So we find out an employee has been embezzling from us.
That would be more on like I would have to, honestly, I've never had, thank God, I've never had an owner tell me, hey, I think this person's stealing money from me. I think in that case, if it wasn't something that was like if they didn't hack their system and get it like electronically.
Like
because
a cyber policy.
If it's electronic, your data breach or your cyber liability is going to cover like any of that kind of stuff. Because obviously with getting into your system and being able to withdraw money or whatever is going to basically be like a cyber attack where you're getting into someone's bank account information and saying, okay, I can get into their bank account, take out however much money they want. That's where your cyber liability kicks in and protects that. Policy, when you get like your business owner policy, it's going to come with that cyber liability coverage. Mm-hmm. It only comes with usually around $50,000 in coverage, like in protection. And that's usually good for like your first like couple of years of being open, because you're not going to have a ton of employees. Hopefully you have patients, but usually it's a slower start. As businesses grow, we always say, let's take a look back. Our business side has progressed in the last couple of years. A lot of our clients are 3 to 4 years into owning their practices, and we're starting to contact these people and we're like, hey, we should look back now and look at your cyber liability because you only have this small limit. We should probably look at upping that to, I think the most that we've done is $1 million in coverage. A cyber attack that high is rare, but it depends. We have owners. I have a DSO group I'm working on that has 15 locations. So for them, if God forbid someone got into their hub of system that controls all their practices, that could be very detrimental. So that's where for that type of person, we're like, hey, you should have the max you could even have, because you have 15 locations with 50 doctors and thousands of patients. If that system gets hacked, like you could go down fast.
Yeah. And I just can't say enough about how I think important cyber insurance is. For my docs listening, almost all our systems now, we aren't running a server, we're running cloud-based. And yes, you could argue that we are somewhat more protected in running a cloud-based system where kind of some of that liability is on the company that is hosting our data. But it's still out there. And I think when we think about just what our employees are doing day to day, they're using our computers and they aren't trying to do anything malicious, but malicious things are out there. They're updating your Facebook website. They're updating Instagram, and a pop-up comes in and they accidentally click on something or this, that, or the other. And that just opens that door for that potential cyber attack. And I think this is just Jill talking. I think we're going to see it less and less where it's people just attacking our system, but getting into our system and putting things where they can track our keystrokes and this, that, and the other. And I think that we now more than ever, I think having that cyber policy in place is key. I'm curious, I know you alluded to the numbers. I love that you guys are going backwards, saying, okay, you've been open I started with you as a startup. You're about 3 years in. Let's look at the numbers you're doing. Let's talk about what this is looking like. And then always adjusting your credit card terminal payments. About every 3 years, you need to be evaluating and saying, okay, maybe you can speak to this.
It's extremely important to reevaluate your insurance. If you don't do it annually, do it every 2 years. As a business owner, I always recommend people do that stuff annually, because when you start your business, obviously your business is going to grow. We were working with this DSO group that we just started writing as of yesterday, actually. And we talked to them about 5 months ago, worked on quotes, looked into policies, and realized so much has changed. We have to redo everything we already did to work on getting you numbers, to figuring out how we're going to bundle these policies. We had to go back because their employee, I think they had 55 employees when we started. It ends up now they have 65 to 70. Wow. So just hiring more employees is going to change your insurance. If you don't actively tweak your policies, you might be lacking in coverage. And then if God forbid something happens, you're going to be like, oh my God, I got this policy when I did my startup 4 years ago, never looked back. Now I'm doing 4 times the revenue. I have twice as many employees. My payroll's increased. Certain things should always be reevaluated. From a personal insurance standpoint, reevaluate disability insurance. Malpractice renews every year. Shop it out, get the best price coverage, but you're also going to make sure that the coverage is adequate for what you're doing procedure-wise. But with disability insurance, a lot of times dentists come out of dental school or residency and they say, just get me the cheapest policy I can get and I'll worry about it later. If they get $1,000 a monthly benefit amount when they're a student or resident, that's fine. But 5 years into working, when they're making $300 or $500 a year, if you go down and if you're only getting $1,000 a month from your disability policy, that's not covering your car payment. What are you going to do with your mortgage, your rent, groceries, tuition for your children's schools? At CF, we usually do quarterly check-ins with clients. We do a quarterly check-in where we're like, hey, Just wanted to see if there's anything we can help. We noticed your disability coverage hasn't been updated in 2 years. We should schedule a call to go over your finances, go over your spending and your income, just to make sure that we have the adequate information. Some people don't believe in high amounts of insurance, which is completely fine. But some like to have the most protection they possibly can. So for them, having that quarterly check-in helps, because they're like, okay, last year I was making $250. This year I'm making $350. If I go down, I need more than I have. You can always tweak people's coverages to make sure that the amount of benefit that they would receive if, God forbid, they had to go on claim is adequate to what they're making and spending. And then on the business standpoint, like even going from a startup where you're projecting revenue of $500,000, 3-4 years in, you're probably going to be making sure the limits on your insurance match what you're making and doing is important. From a cost standpoint, it's very important too, where for people to make sure that they're not paying more than they should be for their coverage. We have a lot of doctors that we'll talk to for the first time, and they're like, hey, I've owned this practice for 5 years, bought the policy, let it renew every year, don't even know what I'm paying for, don't know my limits. You're paying $5,000 a year for something you should be paying $2,000 for. You're waiting to make sure it's not like I reevaluate policies and sell more insurance. I do it to keep more money in their pockets. A lot of times people have coverage, they don't look at it. Yep. You should always have somebody look at it, make sure you're paying the best rate, keep as much money in your pocket as possible. With a lot of it, like the big group that I was talking about earlier, we were able to save them almost like $15,000 a year just because of looking into their stuff that wasn't updated for 5 years. This can all be tweaked. You just let this auto renew for 5 years and you're spending much more than you should be. And that's when the appreciation comes in. We're like, thank God we talked. Thank God we let you see this. Thank God we sent you the policy to look at, because people don't do that. They don't think about it. I've owned a home for 2 years. I should look into my homeowner's insurance more. At least as my home value increases, my coverage is increasing with it. Even on personal insurances that we don't even work on, homeowners, car insurance, things like that. It's always smart to take that 15, 20-minute conversation with somebody to make sure you have the best protection.
It's such good advice. And as I said in the very beginning of this episode, this is truly like the unsexy side of owning a business. Nobody gets in going, woohoo, I can't wait to get on my insurance policies in place. But it's so important to my young doctors. These are the areas you have to protect yourself with, because you have so much liability and worked so hard to get to this spot. I've been in this industry for over 33 years. It can be devastating if you don't have the right policies in place when your dream goes to something other than a dream. Thanks for diving into the nitty gritty of this. But if somebody was listening and saying, okay, Nick's right, like I need to reevaluate or start thinking about this. Can you give like a starting point, like your top 3 things that you would tell a doctor?
If they're a practice owner or planning to go into practice ownership, it's never too early. Even if I want to do a startup in a year, it's never a bad time, or it's never too early to have a conversation about them. From a personal insurance standpoint, make sure you get disability insurance early. When you buy that policy, you lock in. Make sure you get level premium. Don't go for graded. Graded premium starts out great. It starts out super cheap. You're like, oh my God, it's only $20 a month. Every month every year you end up paying 2 to 3 times what you should for the coverage.
Wow.
That's something a lot of times companies go in and they see these naive 23-year-old students that are in dental school, and they're like, this person doesn't know what they're doing. I'll sell you this policy just to get that sale 3-4 years out. And they're like, you're paying twice the amount for the coverage. Why did you get this? And they're like, I don't know. This person told me to. But be aware of what you're getting before you purchase it. If you don't feel comfortable, have an outside person look into it. Even if someone comes to me and they say, I'm working with this company, they quoted me this coverage, can you look at it and tell me if it's good? I'll give my honest opinion. If I think that policy is great, or even if I'm talking to like a startup client where I'm like, hey, if you have any current coverages, send them over, let me review them. I'm going to give you my unbiased, opinion on them. If you send me this policy that's set up like perfectly with the best, you're paying cheaper than I can even get you, I'm going to tell you straight up, don't touch this policy. Keep it, let it roll. You got a great policy. It's important to get more than one opinion, because you never, especially when you're young, if you're in school and you're just like, I just want to get something to get these people off my back and just lock it in and then I'll deal with it later. Always do your research. Making sure you're paying the best rates for your insurance is extremely important, but also on the flip side, making sure that you have coverage in place and the adequate coverage for what you're trying to obtain. With disability insurance, if you want to make sure you have enough to cover your bills if you get injured, make sure you take in effect like all of your bills. Yeah. Look at your rent or mortgage on your home. Look at if you have a family or dependents of any sort. Look at the bills that they bring in. Look at things like just being able to eat. I'm not, and I always tell people, don't plan like when they're like, what do you recommend I get for disability insurance? I'm like, don't take an effect like going to the bar on Friday night and getting bottle service. Because those are things, if you're hurt and you're living off of disability insurance, you shouldn't be doing those things anyway. Just look at like necessity bills, like eating, paying your mortgage and rent, not becoming homeless. If you have a car, making sure you can still pay for the car so you can still get to doctor's appointments, things that are going to matter to get you better so you can get back to work.
Nick, I've been waiting to have you on the show because this is the information I wanted to get out to my docs, clients, and anybody listening. This is not the fun side of owning a business, but it is important. One of those foundational pieces we have to have in place as business owners, as entrepreneurs. If somebody wants to get a hold of you, what's the best way?
If you go to our website, cfsdentaldivision.com, click on agents or like our team, everybody that works there is going to pop up. There's going to be a button under every person's face that's going to say contact me or book a call. My phone number is 431-0567. Call, text, email me. My email is Nick and it's at cfsdentaldivision.com. Take calls, texts, emails 24/7. I'm always at my computer. I'm always, obviously it's 2024. Everyone's phone's in their hand all day. Mine's sitting next to me just in case it starts going crazy. You're going to
be like, hold, Jill. I got two calls coming in. This has been great. Thanks for doing this. I've been looking forward to this podcast because I knew you were going to give us good information. I know there's a lot of docs out there. You're probably going to get a lot of calls, emails. So the way I like to finish up any of my podcasts is to do something called a speed round. So are you ready?
Let's go.
If you could start any business right now, what would it be?
Probably an insurance company, just because I've been into it for the last few years and I want to continue.
Awesome. What's the best investment you've ever made?
Probably my home.
Okay. How do you handle work-related stress?
Hanging out with my 3-year-old daughter.
That's
tones
awesome.
me down. If I have a long day and play with a 3-year-old, I'm like, okay, nothing matters. All the stress is minimalistic.
Yeah. What's one trend in our industry you're excited about?
AI.
Yeah.
I think AI is going to change a lot of things with insurance, every industry. Honestly, I think it's going to change things. I'm excited to see how. I don't know that it has really taken a hold yet, but I think we're all seeing it, and I think it's going to change things. What's
the most valuable piece of advice you would give someone just starting out in their career?
Work hard, do your research, make the best of it.
Yeah.
Find what you love and do your best at it. You'll be successful and enjoy your life.
Nick, this has been a pleasure. Thank you for being on the show. I'd love to have you on again and we can talk insurance again.
Thank you so much for having me. As soon as you reached out, I was like, yeah, I love it.
Till next time.
Take care.